Do you sense a seismic shift in the global financial landscape? Is the US dollar at risk of collapse in 2023? The revolution against the once unchallenged US dollar is gaining momentum, and we're here to break it down for you. In this video, we'll unravel the global economic landscape, explore the hidden motives, and unveil the alternative currencies poised to challenge the very foundation of the world economy. Without further ado, let's get straight into the details of the possible US dollar crash. First off, have you ever wondered what's the need of having a dominant reserve currency? What makes the US dollar the unchallenged dominant currency of the world? Let's understand this with some examples. Imagine you're an American and you want to buy something in Britain. In order to make the purchase, you'll need British pounds. The easiest way to get pounds is by finding a British person who wants to buy something in America, as they would need US dollars. Currencies like the dollar and pound represent value exchangeable for goods and services, enabling trade. However, not all currencies can be easily swapped. Let's take the example of the Swedish krona and the Samoan tala. Despite their equal value, it's difficult to directly exchange these currencies due to limited trade between Sweden and Samoa. Finding someone in Sweden who wants talas is unlikely. That's where the US dollar comes into play. With substantial trade between Samoa and the United States, there will always be Americans willing to exchange dollars for talas. The same applies to the US-Sweden trade, making the conversion from dollars to krona even easier. Thus, using the US dollar as a middle currency facilitates transactions from talas to krona. This process is faster and more effective than finding someone in Sweden who wants talas. With 180 different currencies worldwide, finding currency trading partners can be challenging. That's why around 88% of currency transactions occur with the US dollar, not because they are directly related to it, but because the dollar is the easiest currency for international transactions. This makes the US dollar the most traded currency in the world and makes it the dominant currency of our time. But how did we get here? Let's take a look at the history of the dominant currencies of the world for some context. Throughout history, there has always been a dominant currency that facilitated global business, an easily accepted and trusted currency known as a reserve currency. Early examples include Venice's ducat and Florence's florin, widely accepted across Europe due to their consistent value and successful trade networks. Then the Spanish real became dominant as silver from present-day Bolivia circulated worldwide, followed by the Dutch guilder, which gained prominence in the 18th century with the stability of Dutch currency and the establishment of a central bank. The pound sterling emerged as the dominant currency during the British Empire's rise and the Industrial Revolution, so much so that by 1900 it accounted for 62% of the global reserve currency. So how did we get to the US dollar being the dominant currency of the world today? Well, following World War II, the US dollar took over as the dominant currency due to its control over most of the world's gold reserves. The dollar's position as the international trade currency has persisted over the decades, even as it moved away from the gold standard. And with that history, we come to the present day. Currently, the US dollar continues to play a vital role as the linchpin of the global economy, facilitating international transactions efficiently. However, is the era of the US dollar really at an end? As history has shown, the status of the dominant currency can undergo transformations over time. Recent events have sparked speculation about the future of the US dollar, with 2023 representing a significant turning point. While not directly responsible, Vladimir Putin's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine triggered a series of consequences. Rather than engaging in physical warfare, the West resorted to economic warfare, primarily focused on the United States. The global financial system's reliance on the US grants it jurisdiction over financial infrastructure, banks, involvement of U.S. entities, and even the use of the U.S. dollar. This gives the U.S. nearly absolute control over global finance, enabling the imposition of sanctions that effectively become global sanctions. For instance, did you know that when the U.S. withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal in 2018 and reinstated sanctions, the trade between the European Union and Iran dropped by a staggering 92.8% within just 1 year? The European Union nations were technically free to do business with Iran. However, to avoid U.S. interference, they had to avoid using U.S. banks, companies, or the U.S. dollar, which proved to be nearly impossible. Similarly, by imposing sanctions on Russia, the U.S. swiftly immobilized, froze, or seized around $330 billion of Russian money, both within the U.S. and abroad. That's the power a country possesses when its currency becomes the dominant currency of the world. The repercussions of these sanctions led several nations, particularly those in a gray area between ally and enemy to question the immense power held by a single country. Just like a powerful weapon that raises concerns about its concentration, the immense power held by a single country in the realm of global finance has sparked debates and actions. But what has it led to? China spearheaded the effort against the US dollar by significantly boosting trade between the Russian ruble and the Chinese yuan, utilizing its financial system to facilitate transactions and bypass the Western SWIFT payment system. Since 2010, China has been actively promoting the internationalization of the yuan as an alternative to the dollar, and Russia eagerly joined this mission. As a result, their reliance on the dollar for trade decreased from 94% in 2015 to under 23% by 2020. This approach has been replicated in other regions. Russia and Iran are progressively integrating their financial systems, settling 60% of their bilateral trade in rubles and reals. Amid a historic drought and reduced dollar reserves, Argentina turned to trading with China in yuan to safeguard its resources. Brazil also established a similar agreement, using the Sao Paulo branch of the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China as an overseas hub for yuan-dominated transactions. One of the most significant challenges to the dollar's reign comes from the collective efforts of BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, a group of nations that have evolved into a loose intergovernmental organization akin to the G7. BRICS is now actively discussing the creation of a new international currency for dollar-free trade, with the upcoming BRICS summit in August 2023 expected to focus on this topic. Economists believe that a BRICS currency, supported by their substantial economies, trade surpluses, and the willingness of numerous countries to participate, could pose the strongest challenge to the dollar's dominance. So is all of this actually happening? Is the dominance of the US dollar really over? While the evidence certainly suggests that, it's important to take history into account. Many once believed that the euro would challenge the dollar's dominance and become the global reserve currency, but it didn't materialize as expected. Factors such as the European debt crisis, the absence of UK integration, and lower confidence in its stability hindered the euro's international growth. To identify a potential replacement for the dollar, we must examine where the money could go. Historically, there has always been a definitive global reserve currency. Unless the global economic system undergoes unprecedented fragmentation, a substitute for the US dollar would be necessary. But what could be some substitutes to replace the US dollar in the global economy? One possible contender is a theoretical BRICS currency representing Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. However, internal tensions and Russia's hostile status pose obstacles. Western adoption would likely be limited, and their collective economic strength may not be enough to force a global shift. The Chinese yuan also holds potential due to China's economic growth, but its unique economic system presents integration challenges. Restrictions on capital movement and limited foreign access to Chinese financial markets hinder its ability to challenge the dollar. With the US dollar's firm grip on the global economy, one wonders what could lead to its reign of dominance coming to an end. Two situations could lead to the collapse of the US dollar. The first is a traditional scenario where a massive economic collapse in the United States erodes confidence in the dollar's stability. However, such a collapse would likely be isolated to the country itself, and not a global financial crisis affecting all currencies. The second scenario involves international consensus on the US using the dollar as a weapon. However, while some criticize US actions, most currently see them as reflecting international consensus. A shift away from the dollar would require a fundamental reshaping of the world order and the decline of American superpower status. So while there are signs of de-dollarization, the forces maintaining the dollar's dominance are strong. Its fall would require significant global shifts, not just speculative scenarios. If you're interested in learning more about the economic changes in the modern world, click the video on screen now, where we break down how the emergence of AI would affect the economy.